Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Movement Mastermind. We are delighted to have you here on our Friday morning open Q&A. My name is Shira Lotzar. Happy to host you and joined by Vern Schellinger. And together we are going to help answer your questions on private sector jobs. So we're continuing to be light on having federal and GovCon experts. But hopefully Rick Webb will join us today, who's our GovCon guy. But in the meantime, we will definitely stick with private sector stuff. So with that, does anybody want to kick us off with a question?
Yeah, I was at this Women in Technology job fair yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to weirdest thing. I talked to a recruiter at Amazon. It said he was a recruiter, but afterwards I could not find him on LinkedIn. How is that possible? LinkedIn is what all recruiters use. It said he was a recruiter, not a hiring manager.
That's really, the only thing I can think of is occasionally I've had it where I put the person's name in, and for whatever reason their LinkedIn profile doesn't come up. It doesn't mean
I literally took a picture of his name on screens.
No, I understand, but this is rare, Eric. It has happened to me where I put in the person's name and it doesn't come up. It's not that they don't have one, but for whatever reason, LinkedIn isn't pulling up their name. I don't know why that is. I have seen it happen a few times. So I don't know. But on the other hand, you're right. If he doesn't have one, that would be very unusual. I'm not quite sure what to make of that. By the way, did you put his name and then put the word Amazon in the search box?
It was Amazon Web Services. Maybe I should try all variations of Amazon.
Right. I mean, just try it again. Maybe put his name in the search bar. Just put his name and then AWS.
Okay.
In one string.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that'll help. Or Amazon, whatever, but like put the company name. That is a tip for you guys, by the way. If you're ever looking for somebody and let's say the person has a common name, a John Smith kind of a name, put that person's name. And then if you know their company, put the company just right next to the name in the search bar. And that can sometimes, pull them up. Usually it will. All right, who else has a question?
So Shira, I have a question. I found myself talking to VeriSign yesterday and I found myself being interviewed like right on the spot and I did lousy. Oh. So this morning I've been thinking of things I should have said. And I think that what I'm going to do is write a thank you note and put in some of the things that I should have said that on the spot yesterday, I didn't even know what the job was about.
Oh, yeah.
I had no idea what she was talking about, but I thought of some better answers over the night. And I think I'm going to write a thank you note with some of those points in it.
Yeah. I think that's very smart, actually. Yeah.
I've done it before and it's gotten me to the next level.
Yeah. Just upon reflection, right?
Yeah, some things really came to me and I'll just go ahead and say them now. But at the time I was kind of stunned that she wanted to talk live and that she was actually the manager in charge of the job.
You might even want to say that. Don't use the word stunned, of course, but just say, oh, I was actually, I wish I would have, I would have liked to have been more prepared for the interview. Had I been more prepared, here's what I would have, said. I'm thankful for the spontaneous conversation that we had. Say it that way. Always be positive in these things. I was thankful for the spontaneous conversation.
What I plan on doing.
Yeah. And upon reflection, had I had more time to prepare, these are the kinds of things I would have said.
She kept saying, well, what would you do? And I'm like, I don't even know what the hell the product is to tell you what I would do.
Yeah, that's called a situational question, and that's a little. That can be tricky, right? When the candidate doesn't have background story.
Yeah. Well, just one other thing, Karen, you may not have done as bad as you think you did.
No.
Okay?
I probably didn't do bad at all. I have a background for the job, but I couldn't answer the nuances she was looking for.
A lot
and I kept
better
saying
if you were
things, and I said, well, I'm not getting what you're looking for because I don't know what the job is about.
Yeah. Which is fair. I mean, that, so.
Did you ask her questions like about the job? Like when
that was the other problem. They all kind of flew out of my head.
Well, no, what I mean is like, if she asked you a question that you weren't able to answer, did you ask a clarifying question? Can you share with me more about that, the backstory? So
I
that's a
don't
good
really
tip.
remember, Shira. The whole thing was
A blur.
It's a
Yeah, yeah.
blur.
all of a sudden I was in the Target and I'm like,
What do I do
uh-oh.
now? So it's a good tip, like going forward for everybody on this call, just in general, whether you're expecting the interview or not. But if an employer ever asks you a question that you feel unprepared to answer, even if you've prepared for it, like if you just feel unprepared, go ahead and toss the question back to them and say, this is a
Yeah.
really interesting question. Can you elaborate a little bit on da 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 da? It
Yeah.
buys you some time. It gets more clarity. You can really actually suss it out. Don't feel like you have to like answer it right away.
Way.
You can toss it back.
Yeah, well, I guess the best thing I can do now is, and Vern, you may be right, I may have done fabulous, but to repair anything that may be in the mind, I'm just going to write a thank you note and put some more points in it.
Yeah, that's the right thing to do. Yeah, certainly. So,
Anyway,
yeah.
Yeah.
it was an interesting experience. And the only people that wanted to talk to me one-on-one was VeriSign. So even though there was video capability, not many companies use it.
Yeah, I actually got an interview come out of it, but the guy I talked to didn't open the video.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have a question?
I have a question. You read through the job description, you don't see any mention of an advanced degree. Sometimes you don't even have see mention of a college degree in the requirements. You'll leave that on your resume if you think you're overqualified by putting an advanced degree.
Oh, well, let me say this. In this area, a bachelor's and a master's degree, if you have one, can only be a positive thing. The only time that an advanced degree can be a hindrance, which is kind of ironic to say it this way, is a PhD. And the reason is that for unless you're going after academia and a think tank, maybe, oftentimes people think of a PhD as almost too qualified, which I know sounds silly, right? What could be wrong with more degrees? But it is an academic thing. And sometimes they feel like, oh, they're like too big for their britches, or there's some people feel threatened by, it's ridiculous, but that can happen. So that's but other than that, if they don't mention a degree and you put a bachelor's or a master's, if you have one, that's totally fine. Vern, do you have any different opinion on that?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and unless you're, and I don't think you do this unless you're qualifying for a job that's such a low level job that, then you look really overqualified with a, bachelor's. But I'm assuming everybody's qualifying, applying to jobs that they believe they've got the skills and the experience, and they're lining up with that.
It's interesting that the job didn't put a degree requirement. That actually I don't know why they didn't, but that's actually very comforting to me. And the reason is I have been, it has long been a concern for me that too many employers artificially put a degree requirement in there when there are plenty of people who are wonderfully qualified who don't happen to have a degree. And that is not an inclusive way to recruit. It's actually discriminatory to me. It's not a protected class. It's not that kind of discriminatory, but it is discriminating.
Yeah.
And we are closing ourselves off to wonderful quality people who may not have happened to have either gone to college, couldn't afford it, whatever. So hopefully with the DEI lens that recruiters are having it, maybe that's why they didn't put it there. If that's the reason, yay for them. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
All right, other questions?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So my question to you is, what do you think it's up to certain professions? Like it depends on what profession, then a degree and experience matters equally. Does it make sense? Like I think some jobs
Sure.
just have
Yeah.
experience, it's fine. But some jobs you kind of need like a degree because it's hard to gain experience until you get hired. And then some jobs you require a degree and experience.
I would say more in the STEM fields, the technology, sciences, those kinds of things, for sure. They're gonna more likely require the degrees because of the learning that you got in school, like the expertise. I'd say outside of STEM, more, if you will, liberal arts kinds of roles. I always wonder, well, okay, so maybe like, a lobbyist, right? They might say, oh, we want you to have a degree in government and politics, fine. But there are a lot of jobs where the degree requirement is not necessarily related even to the experience. Sometimes it is, communications degree for a public relations person maybe, but oftentimes they're just looking for a degree. And to me, again, that's pretty artificial. So I think STEM is more the connection between the experience and the degree. At least that's my opinion. Vern, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, my undergraduate degree is in biology, and I never used it in biology, and I ended up in training and development and human resources. But obviously, I left it on the resume when I applied, for jobs. So.
So anyway,
Yeah.
All right, other questions?
But I mean, degree is considered a type of credential, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly not a bad thing to have.
No,
Because
not at all.
what I was thinking is that maybe like another type of credentialing that a lot of people don't think about is other people referencing you.
You mean recommendations?
Yeah. Like I see that as another type of credential,
Um,
but
I-
it's very less likely because it's easier to see that piece of paper, I guess.
so I say I wouldn't call that necessarily a credential. I'd say it could build credibility.
Yes.
But it's from an employer's perspective, the term credential is an academic credential. That's when they use that term, that's what they typically mean. So whether that is a formal degree or it's a certification or even a certificate, but a certification usually, or in a degree, or like, like a PMP or a CPA or something like that, is a credential that they would look for.
Yeah, and references, there's a whole spectrum of references. Yeah, I know somebody who works at that place, and I'll put a good word in for you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, depending on how well they know that person,
Right.
if they don't really know them that well, then that reference really doesn't hold a lot of weight with whoever the hiring manager is or the HR person.
Right.
So your references and recommendations certainly are a positive thing, and you need them, and that's an important part. But it also, there's another side to it. It's who's hearing that reference, and even when people do background checks, so they're talking now to your references. It's exactly what those references say, and then they evaluate that, what that reference said as part of the whole decision-making process.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say maybe the difference is a recommendation versus a reference.
Yeah.
Recommendation is what Vern was talking about, right? Like I recommend so-and-so for the job. A real reference is when the employer calls and says, okay, like proactively asks some questions, about your leadership style, your work experience, all of these things. And presumably the reference is going to be hopefully a former supervisor, direct report or something like that.
Yeah. And that's when you've got to that point and they are calling your references, make sure that you reach out to your references and help them and prepare them for the potential call, and tell them, of all of the things about me, here are the 2 or 3 things that, when they ask you about these are the things that I think are going to be the most critical factors in determining who they're going to hire. So you want to make sure your references are going to, be prepared to really speak to those.
So would you go? I'm sure, Shreya, you're the host, but my question to you is, would you go as far as that you are okay with seeing let's say, a world without, degrees or those pieces of paper hanging on people's walls, as long as they have good enough references and enough experiences?
So I am a bit progressive in this concept, okay? So to double back on what I was saying earlier, I would love to see a world where college degrees don't factor into an employer's decision-making, where they really just look at experience. That would be a wonderful thing one day. And you know what? It might actually happen. It might, only because there's been such a disruption in the college world with the cost of college and all of this. And people feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm saddled with all this debt and I can't get a job, and people are now going to trade school. There's a whole shakeup, right? So it's possible one day that will happen. I do not see that happening anytime in the near future, especially in cities like DC, where degrees tend to be held in high stead. And not only that, but for certain kinds of organizations where you went to college, right? Like there's still, can be that lens, right? But I do hope, I don't see it anytime in the near future, but I do hope one day that is the case. Christine?
Shira or Vern, did you see a presentation that this sounds relevant that they had about a month ago? It was in Northern Virginia, and they actually came right out and said that part of the challenge, while Northern Virginia has, something like 100,000 jobs supposedly open, that the Economic Council and this other person who did a study who used to work for the Obama administration said that the employers in Northern Virginia are so degree, happy, if you will, that they're requiring degrees like for administrative assistants. And so they're trying to put together this program with Northern Virginia Community College that will work with the employers and kind of have this like apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
But they had a Northern Virginia community webinar about it, just to exactly what Shira is saying, is that unfortunately a lot of the employers, and sometimes I know I used to work for a government contractor, if the government is driving a skill set and says that the skill set is determined by a degree, some of it's rolling downhill from the federal government if they were going to bill you. But yeah, they actually, I guess the short of it is that I was on this webinar that recognized that the system in Northern Virginia in some ways is a little bit, it's not even serving the county, shall we say, because there's too many jobs open. And part of the issue is requiring degrees when they shouldn't necessarily have to, like, as I said, for administrative assistance, that may not be the job that this person's seeking, but it's part of the issue.
I will say that for a lot of recruiters, putting down a degree is a default. It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. It's just something you do. You wake up in the morning, you brush your teeth, you write a job description, you put down bachelor's degree. It's like the first bullet, and it's almost an assumption for whatever reason. It's that old joke. If you've ever heard it, mommy, why do we cut the end of the ham off? Anybody ever heard this joke? It's very cute. Mommy, why do we cut the end of the ham off? Mommy goes, mommy says, I don't know. Let's go to grandma. Grandma says, well, I don't know. Let's ask great grandma. Great grandma says, because the pan was too small, right? So we do it because for whatever reason, that was what we used to do. But times have changed, and workforce needs have changed, and there is there's definitely a shortage of quality applicants for a whole lot of jobs. And there's anyways.
Was that the lecture? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There are actually articles now about whether higher education, 20, 50 years from now will even exist.
Yeah.
Because think about the world today, and I'll give you an extreme negative example. You've got 16-year-old kids that are hacking into some computer system, right? They didn't go to college, but obviously they have learned somehow some highly technical abilities to, manipulate technology, which those skills could probably be applied in a much more beneficial way, right? But they've got those skills, and they haven't gone to college. And so there's so many opportunities for people to learn today in different ways.
Which we didn't have that before. The whole university system had nothing to do with the world that we're in right now. Yeah. Besides which, there are people who, back in the day who feel, especially in the liberal arts world, that you learn for the sake of learning, right? It's sort of expand your mind, all of these things. Yeah. But today people typically go to college because they want a job, they want a career, right? And now there's a big disconnect. So, Rick,
what I was what I was gonna say is that I will go as far as make every profession the same. What I can't stand is when people go like, well, some jobs should be exempt from that no degree world. Because you think about it, like it wouldn't be fair if you're gonna say like, well, if you're in this job, you know, it's more comfortable for people to see you to have that, you know, degree or diploma, right? Like, because if you think about it that way, there's gonna be way less incentive in the future for the future generations
Mhm.
to do those jobs if they know that other jobs, like 90% of jobs in the world, will require no degree. And what I'm trying to say, Shreya, is that we need to somehow incentivize or convince people that we can trust doctors, lawyers, engineers, and professors without degrees.
Oh, that's very interesting. Oh, by the way, just so you know, my first name is pronounced Shira, just so you know. But you're right. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that there probably are, there should be probably requirements, for the doctors, the lawyers, what have you, because you don't want a doctor who's never studied how to be a doctor to work on you, right? So I don't know what the line is that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I just think Peter, you bring up a very interesting question. It's very thought provoking. And I'm sure the academics
The reason I brought that up is because when people talk about these topics, it's almost always every single time someone goes like, well, maybe with the exception of doctors, lawyers, and engineers, everything else can do without degree. I'm like, but why can't these three do without degrees?
Yeah.
If you have the experience and the excellent reference, and
Right.
you have excellent track record, there should be no problem.
Yeah, you're again very thought provoking. I think if we ever had a HR on this call, I think that would be a really interesting conversation. Yeah.
Well, the other aspect of that is simply someone willing to give you the opportunity, or the circumstances in which you're in. I'll use my personal example. I was in a master's degree in biology. I got very, very frustrated. I left the degree and said, I'll come back to this. I need time to, clear my head. I said, I'm not going to sit around and do nothing for during while I'm doing this. I got a job as a baker in a Dunkin' Donut shop. The manager was fired or left, and they said, you need to manage the store for us. I said, I don't know anything about business. I haven't got a clue. I don't know anything. They said, do the best you can. Well, sales and profits went up. They moved me to another store. Sales and profits went up. I got an opportunity to go to the training center and become a training instructor at Dunkin' Donuts University. 25 years later, I left as senior vice president of human resources. My degree had nothing to do with that. It was the circumstances by which I had an opportunity to prove that I had particular skills, or could learn skills, or maybe some of their natural abilities. So those things are out there, but obviously that's not going to happen all the time. But if you find somebody who says, okay, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do this job, and lo and behold, you've got the skills, the determination, the wherewithal to learn, you can, a career can be created that way.
That's true. Especially if it's an open-minded employer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great advice. And piggybacking off of that, I have a friend, she just started her job like in September. So, and she wants to get promoted. She started September 27th. So what advice would you give her about, a promotion? I know she just started, so yeah.
Oh, it's a whole question about we're pivoting off of education now. We're going into the promotion land. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
No, that's fine. That's totally fine. I want to make sure that we're not still not connected to the education. So you're talking about just good advice for how to get promoted. Is that right?
Yep.
Well, where do you start? I'll just toss out a couple of things. Vern, Rick, thanks for joining us. Rick is our government contracting expert, so I'm glad he's here. So a couple of things that come to mind is, when you're looking for a promotion, in general, it's all about providing value. Okay. So it's not about you, it's about the organization. Your job is to make sure that you are constantly in a position to figure out what kind of problems need to be solved at a level that is not even necessarily at your level. You want to always be thinking at a higher level, at a more strategic level. I'll give you an example. Right now, I am coaching somebody. She's an executive. She's a vice president. And she is managing somebody who's a director. Okay. Now, this director has been itching for a promotion for a while. And the VP, he's saying to the director, you know, you're not quite ready. Why not? I want to be promoted. I've been here well, blah, 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 blah. Well, what the VP was saying to this director in this particular case is that, you know what, director, you've been really acting like an individual contributor. You haven't really stepped up your leadership skills. And what the VP means by that is that the director was always kind of taking tasks, implementing, executing really well, but not really thinking at a broader level, at an organizational level, not really coming up with the big ideas, not raising her hand and stepping into leadership meetings and tussling ideas. She was really just taking what was given to her. And so in that particular case, she just wasn't setting herself up to be a leader, not to mention the fact that she was kind of complaining a lot. You know, she needed to have a more positive attitude, a much more forward-thinking attitude. And so at the end of the day, so now I'm coaching the VP to coach the director now to be a better leader, okay? Which is working. Thank the Lord, it's starting to work. She's stepping up and she's starting to see it's not about her. It's really about the organization and how can she have a more macro perspective. So I would say that's just one tip is think big, think broader, think a little, don't step out. There's a balance, right? You can't step on other people's toes. You can't start doing their job, but you can start, that person, your friend, can start to come up with ideas, proffer things, banter with their boss and say, well, how about this? Or I noticed a problem over here. Did we ever look into that? Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do that. Be a solutionizer, right? A brainstormer. That can always help. So that's just one thing. Vern or Rick?
I guess there's two aspects to it from my point of view. And in whatever role you have, do your work as well as you possibly can, and in fact demonstrate that you're always looking for ways to improve whatever it is you're working on. You know, making the report better, finding ways to save time and make it more efficient or more effective. But to Shira's point, almost all jobs now connect to some other department, some other group. There's always some kind of collaboration. And so when you're in those situations, learn about what those other functions do. Figure out where the intersection is between HR and finance, and how can HR, help finance do their job better, or get finance to help HR see some things differently, so that you're reaching out. And again, this is the bigger picture. This is from an organizational standpoint when you start to interact with those other groups and other departments.
Actually, Rick, before you chime in, sorry, just Vern, you maybe just think of something. The cross-functional side of what you just said, Vern, is important also because when you participate and you act cross-functionally and participate, let's say in somebody else's project, all of a sudden that department gets to know you. And what happens when the senior leadership team meets and starts thinking about promotions, they go, did you think of Susie? Wait, she's in this other department. She helped our team out doing da 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 da. Like, really? Oh, maybe we can tap her. So you get known by other departments when you start to help them pitch in and start to do cross-functional projects. So that's another thought. Rick?
Yeah, it's value is the biggest key. And so when someone says I've been here for 10 years, that means a hill of beans. Okay, what have you been doing for the last 10 years? And I'll give you an example. I was a project manager for US Visit on a contract, and I was working in the human capital group. We were setting up a college recruiting program for them. And I sat right next to this woman that had been there for 12 years. And I was like, and I spent a year with her, and I was like, what's your job? I'm in charge of the supplies. So she was in charge of staplers and, anything that was needed and she'd been doing it for 12 years. And so my point is, you can sit in a job and do nothing, and you shouldn't expect anything. But if you volunteer to expand yourself, to help the company, it's really up to you. And it's also knowing your environment. If you're in a job where you're not going to be rewarded for going the extra mile, and there are places like that, then move to a different company where you can be rewarded for those things. I had in that same job, I had someone under my um, contract, and he was super motivated, and he was really good at what he did. And he was like, "Yeah, I think I'm going to take this position with the government." And I said, I forget what his name was, but he was a young kid. And I just said, look, I guarantee you will not be happy here a year from now. You're not going to be pushed. You need to do something more. And he didn't end up taking it, but he was going to take it for the money. And so you really need to factor in all those things and look at the place. Are they going to reward people for going above and beyond? You want to think that happens everywhere, but sometimes it doesn't. So you need to evaluate the situation you're in. Sometimes it's better to make a move somewhere else.
Well, I will also say that sometimes the company doesn't reward people, as you're saying, Rick. And as you know, sometimes they just can't promote, right? It's just not within their structure to do that. They can't just create a senior director when you're a director. They have an
Right.
org chart and they have got hierarchies. And it's just one of those things I wish we could, but we can't.
Right.
And that's an HR thing. So there's a lot of factors that go into it, but yeah, it's a lot. It's delicate.
Here's something I want to kind of share. And and I'm pretty sure there are people here that are gonna say this is not, the same thing as you guys are talking about. But I personally don't believe anything is considered fake or a real job. I think any job that pays money is a real job. So I'm going to talk about my personal experience when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old, working for minimum wage customer service job, right? It's at Regal Cinema movie theater chain. This has to do with promotion topic, by the way. So long story short, one night we had a customer coming in literally at the last second as my managers were locking the door. And before he could lock the last door, this gentleman came in. He was like, "Well, can I buy something? I don't want to watch a movie because he goes, I know I'm too late for your latest showing, but can I just buy something to eat? Like I'm really hungry." I'm like, "Okay, sure. What can I get for you?" And he just ordered food. I'm like, "So how are you doing today, sir?" And for some reason, this gentleman completely broke down and he cried. And what happened was that he revealed all his recent dark, history with, his life to a stranger, which was to me. And I was taken aback by it. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? So I decided just to listen, right? Because in those situations, I tend to do pretty poorly, to be honest with you. So him and we ended up talking for like more than 20 minutes until eventually he was noticed by my manager, and my manager was kind of watching the whole thing, but he had to be, quote unquote kicked out because, we have to close sooner or later. And the longer I speak with him, the more time I'm going to take, to close my shift and to clean the parts. And what ends up happening is the guy actually admitted that he said, I actually potentially have saved his life because he thought about killing himself. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is a major thing. So I just thought someone was ranting. But as soon as he made that clear, I thought it was on another level. But, long story short, the whole thing was over. And I never really thought of anything about it. And a couple of weeks later, I was actually going to be made as the employee of the month because of that reason. Unfortunately, this is something that I'm still bitter about, and I'm in my 30s now. I didn't get the promotion. In fact, I never got the promotion because some guy who used to work at the same place, he came back from a 6-year, what do you call it? Like the official terms, like a school gap, right? 6 month, my bad, 6-month school gap. And he just graduated with like an undergrad and some whatever degree. And he got the promotion that I was supposed to get simply because he had a degree. while I think what I did was way more important
Sure.
than his degree, to be honest with you. And I'm really bitter about this.
Well, this is there's a lot of legacy thinking, Peter, in the HR world, where there are many companies that will only promote people into certain roles if they have a college degree. And again, I really do hope that changes. Maybe you can be an instrument of change. Maybe that story that you just shared, you know, framed in a way that is, you know, constructive. Maybe if you ever talk to some HR person, maybe they will, you know, maybe they'll listen to you. Maybe they'll be inspired by your story and say, you know, wow, why do we cut the end of the ham off, right? Why do we require these degrees for these promotions? Seriously, Peter, I would really encourage you, if you ever have a chance to talk to HR people, just to say, you know what, you might, this didn't work for me, but maybe you've got some real star players in your organization that could be contributing at a higher level. If you have a degree requirement, maybe that's something you should rethink. So I think you could really be an instrument of positive change, you know, because you had that story. So that's my encouragement for you, as to how maybe you can turn it into something, you know, for good for other people, you know. So there was this interesting conversation so far. Christine.
I have a question, and it's kind of more in the area for Rick, because of something he said a minute ago. So, you know, I think we fully talked about what you were just saying, Shira, too. But I just want the other person to know is, it's kind of comical in the world we're in. I have 2 degrees and 2 certifications, okay? And I've been unemployed for a year. God is sovereign. And so what I'm just sharing with you is, it's important for us to figure out where our strengths are and then focus on them. I know that. And so my degrees are not going to be the golden ticket that, you know, because the 12 months unemployment has proven that. But my question is to Rick. I was going to apply to something last week and I kind of stopped. It's with a government contractor and it's a patent classifier. Okay. And it's because partly I'm getting to the point of like, I just want to go back to work. I have money in the bank. I can pay my bills. I'm tired of paying in my healthcare out of pocket. It's just a thing with me. Okay. Now, I thought to myself, I stopped because, and there was something you said a minute ago that, you know, if I get to that interview, I may not even get the interview because if they're looking for a square peg and I'm not that square peg. But how do I start that conversation of saying, you know, my goal is not necessarily to stay here and look at patents all day long, because I like problem solving, and I don't know whether it's just like a patent classifier and assembly line, or if there is problem solving there. I mean, how do you sometimes open up those conversations, as you said, to see if there's an opportunity that's bigger, to see if, I mean, but it also has to be in the first interview too. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because you want to say, yes, I want this job, but yes, I want to see if there's something bigger. How do you open up that opportunity?
Well, I'm sure Shira has some answers, but I would say that you would want to make them know that you are looking longer term with them, because you want to provide value to them. So you may come in with a 5-year plan that says, hey, I want to learn, you know, this part of the business, do a little research and say, you know, I'm really interested in XYZ. You know, this is where I want to see myself, so they can see that you have the initiative, you've thought about your future with them. You know, without saying, look, I don't want to review patents for the rest of my life. But you frame it in a way that they're going to look at it and say, wow, I can picture this person moving here also, you know, with a little bit of knowledge, and, you know, she has the drive. You want to show them that you have the drive, the initiative. You know, anyone that I interview that, you know, appears to have a good work ethic, good drive, I try to find ways on how I can fit them in the project. And I'll sell them to the manager. Look, this guy doesn't have all the skills, but look what he did back here. you know, with a little bit of training. So, you know, I'm going back to the college education thing. And I agree with Sheer at the higher level. I would hope they would have for something like a doctor, but the things where I work with, I look at people, and our company is super strict on having college degrees because most of the government agencies want college degrees, but they don't always require them. And so, you know, I think life experience makes a lot, you know, is a huge factor, and it matters. And so if I find someone that has those internal qualities, I will try to make them fit the position.
Okay, so show the intrinsic qualities by talking about your interest and where you want to see yourself.
For me, I would say, wow, this person's really thought, you know, deeper than just, hey, I want to be a patent person, you know, and gives me like, this guy's or gal has a plan, you know, and that says a lot to me. Shira, I'm sure you have some.
No, I think what you said is good. Yeah,
thank you. I mean, I think that patents could be interesting to start out, but I just see myself in 90 days, knowing myself that after 90 days, I would want to do more than just read and classify the patent.
Oh, well, Christine, that's actually a new piece of information. I'm so glad you put that in there. You qualified it with the 90 days. So that's where you're going to want to think hard, because employers do not want to hire you for a job that after 90 days, you're going to get bored. After a year, okay. 2 years, fine. 90 days, then you need to rethink it, because they're making an investment in you. Like, remember, this is about them. You've got to pay your bills. You've got all the stuff that you need, but they have a business goal. The reason why they're making a hire is they want a long or longer term investment from the person. Why would they look? Because if they only needed you for 90 days, it would be a temporary assignment, right? Yeah. If they're actually doing a full-time W-2 hire, they're expecting at least a year. And that's kind of minimum. They're hoping for 2, they're hoping for 3, they're hoping for more than that. So I would ask you to rethink, right? Is this something that you even want to pursue?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of add-ons here, Christine. It's certainly okay in any interview at some point to say what are the career opportunities with the organization, kind of in a broad sense. You know, what kind of, career path can I follow here if I'm starting at this position? That's a normal question to ask, kind of once you've got through the first interview, or maybe even at the end of the first interview, you ask that type of question. The other piece of advice I'd give to you is, how much do you actually know about patents right now?
See, there you are.
Yeah, the more you know about patents and what's involved with patents and what's involved in the process, the more prepared you will be to go into that interview. So again, as the networking guy, I'd reach out to your network and, can you find anybody who works at, patents, who used to work at the patent office, who know, or attorneys who are patent attorneys, that can talk to you about patents and what that world is like, because that may also inform your decision. You may say, oh my God, yeah, they're there for 10 years and that's all they do and they don't promote anybody. Then to Shira's point, do you really want to apply for the job? So, and then a quick public announcement from me. I have to go to the airport to pick up friends and family who are coming in. So I'm going to sign off for today. I'll see you all next week. Take care. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other thing, Christine, and it's for everybody on the call, but since you brought it up, it's not only would you be interested in it, but to your point about not being qualified for it necessarily, right? Because you don't have any experience. Remember that employers are trying to minimize their risk. So there's actually a great likelihood that they wouldn't find you qualified enough to even interview you. Okay. So you've got to, and then unless they're just kind of asking for any background, but mostly employers these days are looking for kind of unicorn candidates. They've been there, done that, folks. So if you haven't been there and haven't done that, then you may want to consider, think twice before actually applying.
Yeah, no, so the way the position description is written is it's 0 to 2 years. And so you're right, it looks like it's anybody and that they're willing to put somebody in there. But I'm kind of thinking to myself, yeah, if I ever get called, to your point, what they're really looking for is exactly what Vern said, is somebody who has previously, at least maybe even holds a patent, submitted a patent, really knows it. And he's right. I know two people who used to work for patents, and I ought to take them out for coffee. And I just kind of stepped over that. So as I said, I'm getting a little weary of looking, so I'm forgetting the basics, which is bad. Thank you.
That's why we're here, to help everybody stay on track, do all the foundational stuff.
I got a quick question. I was wondering if anyone here actually knows or ever experienced with like getting a job, and then let's say, they require you to have like a degree, right? Like at least like a 4-year degree or up. Do they ever like check with the schools or universities you went to on what classes you attended? Or do they just take that piece of paper at face value?
Well, in the late stages, they always run a background check, and then they will find out. At first, they'll take you at face value, but if you reach the later stages, they will run a background check.
Some do. I would say some companies do. Some companies do. And the companies that do the background check, if they're verifying degree, some will just verify that you have the degree, and some will verify, actually look at a transcript and see what you took.
I've also known people to get fired for lying on their application after they've had the position.
What's scary is I'm not, by the way, please don't think I'm advocating for this, but I've done some research, and it's sad, but it's also hilariously sad. But it's that there are people who have admitted to their friends, and I accidentally, eavesdropped on some of these conversations in public before, and I don't even know how these people are still hired. But if what they're telling is the truth, is that there are people with actually fake diplomas still employed because they're actually competent now, because many years has gone by, and even if the company knew about it later on, they'd be like, you know what, you're so valuable to us, we don't really care if you actually lied in the first place. So that's I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know what to say. That baffles me. Yeah. No, not sure what to say about that, Peter.
I mean, if you do a boot camp and then they want the skill, not the degree, perhaps. But if you're lying, it's a different ballgame altogether.
Yeah. All right. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question in regard to degrees in terms of the resume itself. How important is it in positioning it on the resume or the cover letter? Like, should it be near the top? Or I know that resumes get, perused over pretty quickly. So
where should you place your degree on your resume?
Yes, exactly.
So in general, you place it at the bottom. Okay. However, if you are which I don't think we have anybody in this call right now, but if a person is a recent college grad, 0 to 3 years out of college, let's say, or 2 years out of college, then that person would typically put it at the top of the resume, because that's really their cred, if you will. And the rest of it is just sort of internships and light experience. But if you've been in the workforce for any more than, let's say, 3 years, then you always put it at the bottom, because your experience, to Peter's point, actually should speak first. What you've done is qualifying you, and then where you got a degree. I mean, that's sort of a supplemental thing.
So I think with experience, I must point this out, because in some professions, experience can be a catch-22. Here's what I mean by this. Like, for example, computer-related jobs, there's really no excuse for. I have no experience at all before applying for a company like Microsoft, right? Because we live in an age of information. Computer can teach people, and then we can teach computer. So it's this healthy cycle. But for example, if you're going to be a lawyer, right? Well, you got to go to law school, because you can't really quote unquote self-teach like your own like law kind of stuff. But even if you do, here's the thing. You won't have any experience. And this is why new grad lawyers from law school, recent grads, they are advertising the crap out of themselves, because the problem with that profession alone, like there's other examples like it, but I'm just using that as an example, okay? To be a lawyer, especially a newly grad lawyer, doesn't matter what specialty, just in general, you're going to have zero experience, because in law school, they only teach the theoretics about law, the legal stuff. They don't actually even teach you how to become a great or outstanding lawyer. So that being said, how can you have experience when you never had it to begin with? And how can you get people to trust you? Like this is a catch-22. It's almost like,
Always
and
is.
I got to use this phrase. Some companies are looking for 20-year-olds with 30 years of
I
experience.
know.
That
I
doesn't
know.
make no sense.
It is a catch-22 in the old adage, it takes experience to get experience. So yeah.
Well, with lawyers, their professors often vouch for them and their skills. They actually use their professor as a reference.
Well, I mean,
Right,
you
right,
also
but
have to
that's really
consider
not gonna.
that to practice law, you have to be admitted in the bar in the state. I think only in Wisconsin, I think it's only Wisconsin and New York where you could practice as a lawyer without being admitted to the bar if you went to school in those states. Otherwise, you have to sit down and pass the bar to be able to even call yourself a lawyer there, actually. Now, I have a question. My question is that I am being approached by a lot of recruiters, and what I found disturbing is that they don't come up with a job. They say, well, we have some opportunity. We want to discuss the rate with you, but you must send us a copy of your resume. And I feel like, okay, I have several copies of my resume. What aspect of my background is of most interest? Or they say, well, it doesn't matter, you could just send us your resume.
Yeah.
And I'm getting a bit disturbed by this approach, because if you have an opportunity that you are selling, I feel like you should understand it well enough that you could sell it to somebody else.
Well, not necessarily. Jean, let me press pause here. There are some recruiters who recruit for multiple of the same position. So let's say it's a third-party recruiter, and in your case, you're in finance, right? So let's say they place accounting and finance. They're looking to interview in general to see where you might be a fit. So I realize you're trying to send a customized resume, but they're not looking at you that way. They're looking at you more broadly, almost like they were looking at your LinkedIn profile, just generically. And then depending upon the client situation, then they might say, oh, okay, you've got a skill set. Because once they meet you and talk to you and they ask you deeper questions about your experience, then they can say, oh, okay, he's probably more suited for this or for that. As opposed to them recruiting for one job, they're looking to it's almost like an informational interview. Think of it that way. But just like you were going to go talk to somebody in your network and have an informational interview, a Zoom call, right? And they say, can you send me your resume? You send them a generic resume because you don't have it. It's not customized. You can't customize it. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't worry about that too much. Just, and you might even have a little bit of a longer version that has more information for them to look at.
Okay. So then if they have access to my LinkedIn profile, so why would they need a resume?
Because your LinkedIn profile may not be as fleshed out as your resume. Typically isn't. You know, a resume is typically a lot more detailed than a profile.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Right. Other questions?
Speaking of resume and LinkedIn, this is a very general question, but from your experience, or how many people have openly admitted to you, or people who know have done something that I don't know if this is considered illegal, but I know it's a very common phenomenon. It's not lying, but overwhelming amount of people are embellishing their resumes these days.
Look, that always happens. It's a little hard to get away from that. Obviously, that's not a good thing to do. One should be appropriate and accurate about one's resume. That's just what should happen. That said, I think that it's important to flesh out accomplishment stories a little bit and give a little more richness and a little more detail than maybe just kind of a quick one-liner. It helps employers to understand, more about the substance. But yeah, I mean, that should not happen. It should be that people are accurate. I'm not sure what else to share about that. Rick, do you have any comments?
That's the job of the recruiter to flesh that out. So if you're providing information, then we're going to be asking more specific details on that experience. And if it's something that you just copied off of someone else's resume, you're not going to explain it very well.
Right.
which is going to affect your overall, interview.
Yep.
Rick, what I was saying along the lines of something that is not easily catched, which is so small that you're basically thought of this beforehand. For example, how long you've been with this company, right? Let's say 11 months, but you're going to round up to a year because it's close enough. That's still, in my opinion, embellishment.
Yeah, I mean, but people do it all the time. We can't worry about as far as I'm concerned, I can only worry about my own life and my own moral values and integrity. But I know there's people out there that do that. And, sometimes they get away with it, but that's just the way it is. I mean, we try to be fair. We try to have truth in our interviews. And, most of the time, people that aren't, they can't, they're great speakers and they pull something over us and they get in the job and they can't do it. And so then they get, let go anyways. So it's not a long-term value to do something like that when you really don't have the skill set. And it's going to affect how you perform in your role.
Right. It's true.
Rick, is it still lying if people reframe? Because you could have an experience, and the way you frame it, you might frame it differently for different audience. Now, is that lying?
No.
As long as the facts, are the same, how you describe it is irrelevant.
You emphasize different things. So that's not lying
Right.
at all. No.
Right.
Well, if you have an accomplishment story and you want to emphasize this angle or that angle, this competency or that competency, of course. Because look, you only have but so much room on a resume, right? You've got those 2 or 3 lines to share that accomplishment story. You have to frame it somehow. And then I would reframe it depending upon what the client is looking for, because that's what's going to happen in the interview, right? They're asking you very specific questions. Please tell us a story from this angle or from that angle or from that angle. That's fine. All right, other questions? All right, well, we could go ahead and wrap up then. It's 10:15. So for those of you who would like to stay on for the short prayer call, you're welcome to do that. We'll be doing that right after this call. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing everyone again next Friday. And, feel free to invite your friends, right? We'd love to get our numbers back up and have even more people benefit from our call. We understand that it's a good job market now. People are getting jobs, but we would love to be as supportive as possible. So, all right. So have a blessed day, everyone. And again, feel free to stay on for the prayer call if you'd like. Bye-bye.